Thank you very much, Jane, and an extra special thanks to everybody for giving up additional time for this extraordinary meeting of Rutland Schools Forum. We're going to get straight into it because I'm conscious of people's precious time. Jane, have you received any apologies?
Yes, Chair. We have received apologies from Oliver Teasel and Peter French. Also, since the last meeting, we have a new member, Lucy Lewin, who joins us as the new PVI Early Years representative. But I must announce that Alison Chambers has resigned from the Schools Forum. Letters requesting member nominations were sent out to Layfield Primary Academy and Ryall C of E Primary Academy, as they are part of the Discovery Schools Academy Trust and the Peterborough Diocese Academy Trust respectively, and they are not currently represented on the Schools Forum. The closing date for nominations was the 17th of November, but to date no nominations have been received.
Okay, thank you for the update and welcome to Lucy. I believe Oliver has joined us, so welcome, Oliver.
Yep, I have sent him authorization to come through. He just needs to click on it and come through into the group.
I'll press on, Jane, whilst we're trying to resolve that.
Yeah.
All right. So item 2 on the agenda is minutes and actions from our previous meeting, which was, of course, the 5th of October. So if we could just run through these minutes, which we will all have in front of us as part of our packs. It's page 5 in the big pack bundle. Could we just have people shouting up, raising their hands if there are any amendments that they would like making to these minutes? So page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8. I can't see any hands going up, so I'm going to take those as a true and accurate record of the meeting we had on the 5th of October, and therefore we will just run through the actions. Action number 1 was for Dawn that we would have an officer in attendance at all school forum meeting to answer financial queries. I believe, Dawn, that has been resolved because you've
got 2 today.
We've got 2. Fabulous. So we can mark that one as actioned and completed. Jane, action number 2. We would arrange, that's Dawn again, arrange presentations to be given regarding the Delivering Better Value programme and the National Change programme. So do you want to just update on that?
Yeah, you're going to get a full presentation from the Change Programme Partnership lead at the next full scheduled Schools Forum.
Excellent, thank you. Action 3 was for myself and Jane to reorganise this meeting, which we're currently having, so that's completed. Action 4 was for Jane to email details of the early help coordinator to all Schools Forum members for named representatives. That's clearly been completed. And action 5 was for Bernadette. This was relating to the Autism Education Trust and whether the licence could be funded through DBV. That has been resolved. Unfortunately, it wasn't possible, so we can close that as an action. Bernadette has her hand up, so Bernadette, would you like to go?
Just very briefly, Chair. I did respond to you directly about it wasn't factored into the DBVE budget and the plan. However, we have been looking at what the other options might be in terms of the SENCO, the area SENCO roles within the DBV programme. So it's not completely concluded yet. So I value just leaving us some time to consider that as we develop the area Senko role.
Okay.
And we
That's
are
great. Thank you.
we're liaising with Marion, who is the AET lead on this.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's good. Just so the group are aware, we have had to. We've passed the deadline now for renewing the license. But if there is a resolution possible, I'm sure we could resurrect that with the AET, and we will wait with bated breath to see if there is a solution. Right then. I'm going to move on to item 3 then, unless we've got any other hands up. And this is the DSG and Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Recovery Plans. So I shall be handing over to Andrew for this.
Hi everybody. Apologies for not being at the last meeting. Hopefully I'll have a comprehensive update for you this time. As part of me presenting the financial position, I will have a recommendation and then to note the contents of the report. The main recommendation is to agree that we set up a finance subgroup of schools forum to discuss the finances on the DSG as a whole in a bit more detail. So everybody at Schools Forum, a collective of people at Schools Forum, have a greater understanding of the financial position on the DSG as a whole, and not just relying on me to portray that. So I'll start off with the SEND recovery plan and investment from the schools block. So the total budget for the recovery projects is 364,000 this year. This investment was partly funded by the 0.5% transfer that is given from the school block. So that's approximately about 150,000. So that enables us to put in investment in around the school support partnerships that were set up and the wider recovery plan as well. So the school support partnership has the primary model. It's still evolving. It's only been set up for a few years now, and obviously some of those were in COVID. So it is progressing. At the last count, we had in 2023, we had worked with 44 children across the primary provision. So what we have offered, and it says is 14 of the 70 primary schools completed SSP speech and language therapy training. A new sensory environment audit support is offered and now accessible for all schools, for all primary schools. The new Nurture Nest outreach lead is now established. And we've got a multi-agency approach, which meets every 3 to 6 weeks, case dependent, for escalation and placement risk continuing to be an effective measure of ensuring a well-commuted plan is devised and monitored to prevent exclusion. So currently 7 cases are under that, coordinated by the SSP coordinator. So there is a number of actions that is happening within the primary SSP that I think everybody who's been involved in that process has spoke about how much of an impact that is having. We are still establishing the secondary model. So there is a termly meeting with each secondary school and SSP professionals and inclusion team to discuss current cases and identify new and emerging risks. Referrals are rising and in some meetings are still raised at crisis level. So, and it reflects the pattern of the primary phase as well when we were setting up the primary phase. So we are setting up, the secondary phase is still going through setup procedures. So moving on to the early years model, part of the recovery plan. So again, SSP speech and language therapy continues to work collaboratively with the early years inclusion team. Joint planning and training delivery with the early years specialist teacher, offering termly consultations with settings. All settings are now accessing advice and support and training to support early identification. And Thriving Through Change early year phase steering group is ongoing to ensure a robust transition process. So there is a number of actions at early year level. I have put a commentary around Ofsted. I won't run through it in too much detail, but it is there in the report. So in terms of the recovery plan, moving on to the capital development. So Rutland, we're about to open the expression of interest process imminently to meet priorities for SEND in line with Rutland inclusion strategy and the government's proposals around the SEND Green Paper and the DfE special provision in terms of grant. So we've worked with schools to determine the priorities will be to develop and equip an alternative provision in secondary education for Rutland students, to prevent short-term interventions expected within 3 months and 2 years, offering a more sustainable alternative to provisions usually commissioned by Rutland. Early years and primary mainstream small group facilities, so up to 3 small class groups across schools that may be utilised as family hub facilities as well. Building on learning from the secondary mainstream plus small group arrangements, developing mainstream plus places from 2024 onwards. And lastly, to create primary nurturing environments, potentially 8 across the county, minor refurbishment for a grant process to create breakout spaces in primary schools to enable children's specialist or emerging needs to be met in mainstream schools. So there is a little bit there around the allocation of all of these. So mainstream plus is around 600,000, primary breakout spaces around 3,000 to 6,000 per site, and alternative provision development could be up to 360,000. So I have put the delivering better value on there, but I've just put a link to the previous schools forum because that was where a more detailed update was given. So I haven't gone through that again. Next is the early years pathway, an update on early years pathway. So on early years, we are working with providers in the private, voluntary and independent sector. We're in favour of developing greater confidence in practicing inclusion in their workforces. A highly experienced specialist teacher has now been linked with each setting. And it goes through a little bit more detail in terms of where we're up to in terms of that provision. We have created an additional 4 places at the DSP at Open Primary, and a further 4 expected in September 24. Now I'll come on to one of the approvals I've asked for is to set up a finance working group. So the reason why I think this would be beneficial is the overall position on the DSG at the minute is obviously a deficit position, and the recovery plan is having an impact, but we're still building on that deficit in year as well. So each year we are building on an in-year deficit position. So if it was established, it would act as a permanent advisory subgroup in the full schools forum. Importantly, it would report to schools forum and not in itself a decision-making body. So there may be recommendations that the finance group would make and pass on to schools forum. It wouldn't be a decision-making body. So I've put down what I believe the key operating principles would be, and it would be to assess the financial information prior to presentation to schools forum. So we could get under the, I can present more detailed information for the people on that group to be able to understand the position, to consider implications of any financial proposals. So when we are presenting information, we can kind of give you a bit more background around the financial modelling that's been done to get to the assumptions that we have. To provide considered information and advice and support the work of full scoring around financial matters. So obviously at the last meeting, for example, we took the 0.5% transfer as a decision. That could have been considered, and what alternative options are, what else can we do around that, and discuss to that group. So I said leadership of the group should be provided by a nominated member of schools forum who would work with the local authority when reports are taken to schools forum, and membership of the group could include finance office from schools, but would also need representation from the schools forum. So I am happy to speak to your finance officers as part of that group, but we would need to ensure that we had enough representation from schools forum on that board. The last thing is the current financial position. So the current financial position is as per the table. So we are currently running an in-year deficit of around 545,000 on this high needs block, which continues to be our main pressure area. We've had an increase of 37 EHCPs, and it continues to grow. So that is in excess of 10% increase since the start of the year. So that continues to be a pressure on the high needs block. The other blocks are all operating within the allocation for this year. It is just the schools block that continues to cause us issues. As I've said, it was 35 at the time of the writing report. It has now increased to 37. So we are seeing significant increases across that piece. And as I said, conclusion of the report, so it gives an update on the recovery actions we've currently undertaken, and there is a recommendation to set up a finance subgroup of schools forum to ensure that we can get greater oversight and ownership of the position on the DSG. And as I said, there's for impact on policy and early stage. That is the end of my report. Happy to take questions.
Okay, colleagues, so does anyone have a question or comment that they'd like to pose to Andrew? Right, so from that period of silence, Andrew, I can assume that everybody is in agreement with the proposal that you've made there, both in terms of allocating 0.5% and also the working group. How would you like to proceed in terms of establishing that finance working group?
I don't know, Jane, from a governance point of view, do they need to propose and vote on setting up a finance subgroup?
Yes, they do, Andrew. Yes, you're correct. They do. So, Chair, you need to put that option out to the group for them to vote on and formally agree.
Well, okay, can we have a show of hands then? If we could formally vote on the creation of a finance working group. Raise your hands, please, using the function on Zoom.
Assume it's only members are allowed to vote on this.
Yeah. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 accepting, Chair. Do we have any abstentions? Or anybody voting against? Craig, you just need to take your hand down, please. Thank you. That's all approved, Chair. Thank you.
If I could have nominations of who you'd like from your schools or who you'd like to represent sent to me, I can arrange setting up the first subgroup, and then what we can do is report back at the next schools forum who those members are and whether we've got enough to be called on that and whether there's enough engagement. So like I said, we do need to have a lead from schools forum. If we could agree who that would be now, that would be really useful.
So is there anybody in the group who would like to take a lead on that? We might need to do some arm twisting behind the scenes, Jane, in order to gain a volunteer for this. But in terms of other members volunteering, so people like school business managers, finance directors, Andrew, I think an action for myself and Jane is to organise a communication to all schools and ask them to nominate people who they'd like to be involved in the group, and we can work on somebody within this group who could chair it. Is everybody happy with that?
Is there a pithy line about what this group's going to do that we can use?
Sorry, what was that, Stuart? Is there
Is there a nice short line that explains very quickly why anybody would want to volunteer? What's your with them?
Hi, Chair. What I would suggest is if Andrew sends me a couple of lines about the group, and then you and I draft an email that I can then get sent out to the schools asking for representatives to attend and form the subgroup.
Sounds great. We'll try and think of something enticing to encourage people involved.
Thank you, Chair. I'll mark that as an action.
Fabulous. Right, okay. We can move on then. The next one is funding for trade union facilities time. Is there anybody, I've not got any initials or name next to this one. Jane, do you know who's taking the lead on this? You're muted, Jane.
Thank you. It was information that we received from Andrew that he forwarded for distribution to the schools forum. It was a letter and asking for funding that the schools forum needs to approve.
So basically, I think we've been asked to pull some funding from schools forum centrally for trade union facilities time.
Correct.
But I think we need to take some views from across the group, particularly of the members who work in schools, as to whether we're comfortable with this proposal.
It wasn't discussed at the last meeting because we didn't have a union representative. However, today we do have Gary Morphus in attendance. Gary, do you have anything to say on the matter?
Yeah, unfortunately, hope you can hear me okay. Yeah, unfortunately, unfortunately, it's relative to the teaching unions. Obviously, I'm only representative of support staff. I've been involved in a number of JCCs where this topic has been discussed. That's essentially across Leicestershire. But it's not something that Unison has actually bought into at this stage. So it's difficult for me to comment one way or the other.
Okay, thank you. Stuart, as a fellow secondary academy principal, what do you think the implications would be of us not doing this?
I don't really have a view, to be honest, Ben. I don't really understand what you're talking about.
So this is we've had a paper from ASCL, NAHT and the NEU asking Schools Forum to set aside some central funding for trade union facilities time.
I'd be reluctant because it's going to be money that comes out of schools, surely.
Yeah, and I was of the same view, to be honest. And we've not done this previously, so I couldn't see the advantages of doing it. But I didn't want to be sort of proposing that.
I think if we had lots of surplus, we've just made the decision to transfer 0.5% from schools block into high need, which, as people know, I was concerned about because this has now become a recurring issue each year, and this would be further funds we'd have to take out of schools to fund this.
Okay. Can I ask any other school colleagues if there are any strong views or just views in general about this before I ask? Because I do think we need to take a vote on whether we do this or not. So I'm just going to give people the opportunity to contribute. Craig.
Yeah, I agree with Stuart. I'm not sure, and yourself, I'm not sure what the benefit of this is. It's not something that usually happens. So I don't see it as an important thing to take more money out of schools block for that, personally.
Thank you. Steve, hands up.
Yeah, yeah, I concur. I agree. I think that the money should be spent on the children, our local children in our schools.
Thank you. Okay. I think we've got a relative consensus there amongst school staff, Jane. I'm just going to give anybody else the opportunity to say anything to the contrary or to also contribute in agreement. All right, well, I think we've made a decision there, Jane, that we are not going to pool those resources as requested.
Sorry, Chair, we just need to put it out for a vote.
Okay, okay, we'll do it properly. Hands up then, please. Who would? The proposal then is that we do not pool resources for trade union time. If you could raise your hand if you're in agreement with that, please.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Jane, could I just ask something? I notice I'm an attendee. Am I allowed to vote or not?
No, you're not, councillor. No, you're not actually a member of the schools forum. You are regarded as just the portfolio holder, so you have no voting rights on this group.
Oh, right. I'm glad that's cleared up.
Right then, item 5 is the Nurture Hub and Practice. And of course, we did receive this report back in October, but we couldn't make a decision on it. So who am I handing this one over to? And Craig, you declared an interest, obviously, in this previously. Are you presenting this, Craig, though?
I don't think so. I think the reports was sent out last time ready for discussion. I'm happy to answer any questions, but
okay.
If anyone's got any questions, but yeah, I obviously can't vote on it because it's within my school.
Well, it's a pretty thorough report, and my conclusion is that the costs of the provision has gone up considerably, and so therefore the funding model needs to rise in order to meet that demand. I think I need to open it up to group members to ask Craig any questions they might have before we take a vote on whether we're going to approve this increase in funding. So hand over to the group, just look for hands up now. Okay, I can't see any. Jane, correct me if I'm wrong.
Lucy Lewin has raised a hand. Sorry, Lucy, do you have a question?
Yes, just really quickly, Chair. Obviously, being a new member to the group, can I just have a little bit more kind of context? Obviously, I've had a quick look at some of the things, but just kind of bring me a little bit more up to speed in what's kind of happening here. Just really quick.
Okay, Lucy, have you got the paperwork? It's agenda item 5, it's page 23 of the pack, and it's a report prepared by Penny Rawlins, who's the head of school at Edith Weston, and this is their nurture provision, which has been a well-established part of the support for young people in the primary sector in Rutland, and it's essentially a request for a slight uplift in the funding in order to meet rising costs.
Fab, thank you.
Craig, I apologise if I've butchered the description of that.
That's fine. I think it's probably just important to say that it does support children across Rutland. It has children from across Rutland in the hub, but the Nurture Hub lead also does outreach work across Rutland as well, which is a really, really essential part. So, yeah, so it's not just in the school, it's countywide.
Stuart.
Yeah, I was reading the report, and one of the risks that was identified was children who attend the Nurture Hub stay on roll at Edith Weston. How many children has that affected, Craig, out of interest?
No, I'm new to the trust as well, so I've only been here since September. Currently, I think there's 3 children in the school who originally attended the Nest and are now in the school. So, and a couple of them have been really, really successful. So, yeah, it is a bit of a risk, but we're working with the new Nurture Hub lead who started in December. We're working more on the transition out program, and that's more comprehensive now. So there's a lot more work with the home school to set up their expertise and develop them in conjunction with the hub, ready for the children to transition back. So hopefully in the future that will be better and easier to manage.
And I noted, I'm just looking at the data in Appendix B. and it talks about 5 mainstream Rutland schools of access support. How many mainstream Rutland schools are there?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. Maybe.
Actually, I'm just looking underneath. There's quite a lot more than 5. I just wonder, is that because there's a lack of understanding about what the provision is, or is it, what is the reason? Do we know what's the?
I don't know the
access that support. How is this? Because this funding is again going to come out of schools, and so we want to make sure as many schools as possible are, and children who need it are benefiting from it. And there will inevitably be variation, but how do schools know how to access it? How do they bid to access it? What sort of children then access it? Is that a fair question, or am I being a bit?
No, that's a fair question, and I don't know the full answer, but my understanding is that these are children that are worked on by the inclusion team, Rutland inclusion team, and then they're referred. So a point of referral, ours get it. The nurture hub gets involved, and generally they're the ones where basically there's the first referral would be early help and working within school with other professionals into that. If that's not been successful, then they'll be referred to us, and then if that's not successful with that intervention, it would really be looking at special school places. So I guess the point of the nurture's involvement is really to avoid permanent exclusion. So that's probably why it's that number.
Greg, I think Bernadette.
I'm assuming is this coming out of the high needs funding? Sorry, Ben, I apologise. It's probably Teams, isn't it?
You go ahead. Sorry.
I'm assuming, is this funding coming out of the high needs funding that we've agreed to buy across already? Is that correct, Andrew, or is this coming from somewhere else?
It will be coming from the high needs funding. Obviously, at the minute it will come out of the overall support package for our recovery plan. We don't allocate it specifically to this. So what we say is we've got a number of actions that is funded from the 300 and I just need to refer back to my call. We want to get the right figure. So it is around it comes from the 364,000 that is there. So obviously the 0.5% transfer enables us to invest more than what we normally would do. And this is one of the projects that is funded through that.
Okay. So this is the same part that will come out of the SSP work and that sort of stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
If I could just bring Bernadette in, who's had her hand up patiently for a couple of minutes.
Ben, if I could just add a little bit more context and hopefully answer some of Stuart's questions. Having met with Caroline Creasy, as you know, as the SSP coordinator, and also with the nurture lead, really positive conversation. 2 of our primary schools are now setting up and have their own nurture spaces, and the SSP are just about to launch invite schools to be part of the Nurturing in Schools national accredited program. So opportunity to sort of bring about sort of that expertise in all of the schools, and it's system wide in the school, so school wide. It's a really exciting program. There's some really good practice coming from other areas, and what we're trying to do, you heard Andrew made reference to the capital program, the opportunity to create nurture spaces in at least 8 primary schools. What we're wanting to do is to tie in that capital money into the accredited program, because I think the view from the SSP was, rather than just passporting out money for capital money to create nurture spaces, it was really important to develop the understanding of nurture across the school's workforce. So we're trying to tie both together, but there's been some really positive examples of where other primary schools have now set up their own nurture provision. And I think the outreach, would be fair to say, was the almost phase 2 of the nurture program at Western. That's working well at the moment. There's good coverage across the schools, but we think the accredited program will really encourage all of the schools to take part, and then have the option to have that enhanced by some capital funding as well. small amounts.
Thank you, Bernadette. Stuart.
So when I look at the funding model, it was 171 last year and 189k this year, and most of that funding is going on staffing. What's the plan next year? Where's the 3-year plan? And if we're looking at improving nurture provision across the county, is there an intent for that funding to be disseminated over time, or is this a long-term project? What's the ultimate aim with it? So I look at it in the context of, for example, DSP funding. That's roughly what we get for a 30-place, 25-place DSP funded provision. Is there a long-term plan for this? And if so, it goes back to the SEN funding and how we buy 0.5% across. I just think we should be looking more than just this immediate year. We should be having a plan for what this looks like over 3 years.
Bernadette, would you like to answer that question?
I can answer it, and I'm sure Andrew will have more detail than I would. But I mean, the SEND recovery plan was always intended to be a 5-year program. So Schools Forum have agreed the funding for a 5-year period. So it's not intended to be long term, is my understanding.
Have we got any other comments or questions from the group?
I'm thinking about that finance group. If nobody else is interested, if somebody could share with me what the commitment is. As you can tell, I've got a bit of an interest with money. So if nobody else is interested in it, I can manage it. I will consider it, but I'd need to have a bit more detail about what the time commitment is. But I've not got a CFO who is in a position to support at the moment. And I think it would be better if a different CFO from a different trust was actually involved in any case. It's just a thought, but I'd need to know the time commitment before I can say I'll do it.
I almost snapped your hand off, Stuart. Andrew, would you like to come back, and then I'll pass to Craig after that?
All I was going to say is I'm happy to share with you around the requirements, Stuart. So I'll share with you and give you some examples of how it's done in other organisations as well, so you can have a look at the types of things that they discuss as well. So it is around how can we reform the policy around the overall dedicated schools grant. So it is things like, should we have a growing role fund, all of those types of things, and what are the impact if we did have that? How do we have that? How do we bring it forward?
Okay.
So to get involved in those types of things.
Yeah, I'll have a look. I did it before with years ago when we reformed the whole the last formula. So if there's nobody else willing to, I'll have a look with it. But I'd want another trust to also support with perhaps a CFO or somebody else is interested in finance. If that's possible.
We do need that cross representation across Schools Forum. So
I wonder if what about somebody approaching Rob Goodings, because he's got a lot of schools. Yeah. He's got an experienced CFO. I just wonder if that's so it's not just a secondary either. I think it's important it's representative.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the idea from Ben and Jane around if we agree in a set of words to send out to all schools, that will encourage more people to come forward around that. But I will send you something separately on it, Stuart, so you can get a good idea of
thanks, Andrew.
And requirements required.
Excellent, thank you. We'll go to Craig and then to Steve. Craig, you're muted, I'm afraid.
I was just going to say the reason for the uplift in the request for the extra money is due to staffing with the uplifts of TAs and teachers, and with the increase of outreach work and the actual, I'm sure Bernadette will agree, the quality of the outreach lead, it's to ensure that we're able to remunerate her appropriately, and also so that we can keep her and develop her in the role that she does. She is absolutely essential, not just to the Nurture Hub here, but I think to the programme across the county. So and with the uplift for teaching assistants and teachers, that's, you know, I'm sure we're all aware has been quite significant. So we need to cover those costs as well as to run the provision and develop it as we're hoping to do. That's it.
Thank you for clarifying that, Craig. And I think finally, Steve, before we move on for a vote on this.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, I was just going to say, Andrew, if you can send that over to me, then I'm happy to take it back and have a conversation with Rob and the central team about it.
Yes, Steve, will do.
Thank you.
Okay, then, fabulous. I think we are in a position where we can take a vote on this. So all those in favour of supporting this uplift in funding for the Nurture Hub, could you raise your hand electronically, please?
Thank you, Chair. That is 4 members. That is unanimous, because Mr. Chatteris has needed to not able to vote due to a clash of interests. But thank you, everybody. That is passed.
Lovely, thank you. And then item 6 is our work plan, which we've obviously had for a while. Our next meeting is set out for us there, 1st of February 2024. And then a slightly less populated 9th of May agenda. So if there are any items that you would like for the group to discuss in either of those meetings, please could you send those through to Jane as soon as possible. Dawn, I can see a hand up from you.
Yeah, just quickly, it's I think there's an erroneous send inspection report agenda item on there, which needs to come off for the 1st of February.
Thank you, Dawn. I will remove and update it. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on our work plan? All right, then. We've got our next meeting dates, which are the 1st of Feb and then the 9th of May. And therefore, I believe that brings our meeting to a close, unless you've had any items of other business Jane sent you in advance.
I have not been notified of any urgent business, Chair.
Okay, I'm just going to take a quick look on my screen to see if there's anybody with a hand up before we call it a day. All right, well, thank you all for this extra meeting that we've had. Really appreciate the time you've dedicated for it. And I'll see you all again soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you, Chair. Meeting closed at 16:45.
Thanks, Jane.